The sky of Ziora was split open by fire. Warships thundered across the heavens, their trails blazing through the alien clouds. The ground trembled as alien armies marched in formation, their banners carried high with pride. The people of Ziora had known battles for centuries, but none like this one. This was not a war of territory or honor. It was the war of survival, and at the center of it stood a single human who was never supposed to be there. His name was Daniel, and he had landed on their world by accident. Yet his presence would soon change the fate of empires. Daniel had come with nothing but survival gear, a backpack, and the scars of too many lost missions. The aliens had seen him as weak, fragile, and unworthy. To them, humans were creatures of soft worlds, not forged for planets like Ziora where storms could strip skin and beasts could devour soldiers whole. But the very planet that crushed the weak gave Daniel strength. He breathed its harsh air, walked through its burning jungles, and fought the predators that even the alien warriors feared. Slowly, the whispers spread. The human was still alive. The human could not be broken. The queen of Ziora heard these whispers in her grand citadel carved from obsidian stone. She was tall, regal, her crimson crown shimmering with living gems that pulsed like hearts. Her people worshipped her as both ruler and warrior. When she stepped into the war council, her generals bowed low. She listened as they described the mysterious human who had fought their beasts and survived. The queen narrowed her eyes. To her, this was not strength but defiance, and no one defied her and lived. She declared before all, "Bring this human to me. I will show the people that flesh as soft as his cannot withstand my blade." The chamber trembled with her words. Daniel did not run when the queen's soldiers came. He saw the glow of their spears in the night and knew they were hunting him. He could have hidden in the shadows of the forest, but something inside him refused to hide anymore. He faced them with firelight on his face, a sharpened stick in his hand, and the scars of beasts across his skin. They surrounded him, their armor gleaming, their laughter sharp. Yet when they struck, they fell one after another, their pride bleeding into the soil. Daniel fought like a storm, silent and relentless. The queen's soldiers returned with broken weapons and broken pride. Still, they dragged him before her throne, bound in chains of silver that glowed with power. The queen looked at him with contempt. "You are fragile, yet you fight. You are small, yet you defy. Tell me, human, do you think destiny favors you?" Her voice echoed like thunder. Daniel, bruised but unbent, raised his head and answered, "I don't believe in destiny. I believe in fighting until I can't breathe anymore." His words rippled through the hall like a challenge no alien had dared to give before. The queen rose from her throne, her armor reflecting the firelight, and drew her crimson blade. "Then you will fight me," she said, "and when you fall, your kind will be forgotten." The court roared approval. The duel was set in the great arena of Ziora, where tens of thousands gathered to witness the moment. The ground was ringed with fire, the air thick with chants. Daniel was given no weapon but the chain that had bound him. The queen stood with her blade glowing with ancient power, her eyes burning with pride. The crowd expected a swift end. They expected the queen's blade to cut the human in two. Yet as the horn sounded, Daniel did not cower. He moved with speed born from years of struggle, dodging her strikes, using the chain to block the deadly arcs. Each time her blade missed, the crowd gasped louder. Each time Daniel stood back up, their faith in her power trembled. The queen struck, harder, faster, her pride turning into fury. Sparks flew as steel met chain. Dust rose from the ground, covering them both in smoke. And in that smoke, Daniel's voice rang out. "You think I'm fragile, but I come from a world that breaks its children and makes them stand again. If you want me broken, you will have to kill me." His words cut sharper than any blade, and the crowd fell silent. For the first time, the queen hesitated. Her strike faltered, her eyes caught by something in him, something she had never seen in any warrior. Not fear, not weakness, but unyielding defiance. In that heartbeat, the arena shifted. What began as a duel of death became something else. The people saw not a human and a queen, but two forces locked in a fate neither had chosen. The fire between them glowed brighter, the mist above swirled as if the planet itself was watching. The queen's blade hovered at his throat, but she did not strike. Daniel, bloodied and battered, did not lower his gaze, and in that moment, the destiny of Zeora bent in silence. The queen had challenged the human, but destiny was about to bind them forever. The arena held its breath. The queen's blade lingered at Daniel's throat, its crimson glow painting his face in firelight. Thousands of voices had gone silent, unsure of what they were seeing. No human should have lasted this long. No outsider should have stood against their queen. Yet here he was, bruised, bloody, and still unbroken. The queen's grip on her blade tightened, but her arm would not move. Something in the human's defiance echoed within her chest. For the first time in her reign, she wondered if the war she was fighting was against him, or against fate itself. Daniel did not flinch. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but his eyes never wavered. He had fought wars on worlds the queen had never seen. He had buried friends under alien skies. He had survived storms that shattered steel. Compared to those battles, this was not the end. It was another test. The chain around his wrists glimmered as he slowly raised it, not as a weapon, but as a sign that he would keep fighting no matter how hopeless it seemed. The crowd murmured, torn between loyalty to their queen and awe at this impossible human. The queen's generals looked uneasy. They wanted blood. They wanted their queen to finish it, to show that no alien, no human, no creature could ever match her. Yet she lowered her blade. Her eyes narrowed, not in mercy, but in something deeper. "You should be dead," she said, her voice cutting the silence. "And yet you stand. Tell me, human, what gives you such strength?" Daniel's lips curved into a faint smile. "I don't fight because I'm stronger. I fight because giving up is worse than dying." His words struck harder than any weapon. The crowd did not cheer. They listened. The queen turned away, her blade sliding back into its sheath. Gasps rose from the stands. Never before had she spared an enemy. Never before had she shown hesitation. Her crimson crown caught the torchlight as she faced her people. "This war is not over," she declared, "but this human, he will live. His fate is now tied to ours." Her words carried across the arena like thunder. Daniel's chains were struck loose, though the guards watched him with wary eyes. He was not free, not truly. He had become something far more dangerous, a living symbol. That night, in the silence of her throne chamber, the queen paced like a restless predator. She remembered the human's defiance, his words, his eyes that refused to bow. Her empire had been built on obedience and fear, yet this man had neither. Instead, he carried scars and pain and still stood tall. She clenched her fists, unsure if she hated him or respected him. "Why do you haunt me, human?" she whispered to herself, though no one was there to answer. Daniel, meanwhile, was given a small cell in the lower halls of the citadel. It was not a dungeon of filth, but a chamber lit with cold blue light, the walls carved from stone older than empires. He leaned against the wall, listening to the echoes of alien voices outside. They spoke of him now. Some cursed his name, calling him a beast who should have died. Others spoke with awe, as if he carried the strength of legends. He closed his eyes, weary but unbroken. He knew the queen had spared him not from mercy, but from something she did not yet understand herself. The following morning, she summoned him. Daniel was led through great halls where alien murals told stories of endless conquest. He walked past warriors in silver armor, their eyes sharp with contempt. Finally, he stood before her throne again. The queen regarded him in silence, her crimson blade resting at her side. Then she spoke. "You defied me, yet you live. My people question my choice. Tell me, human, why should I let you walk among us and not cut you down?" Daniel met her, gaze without fear. "Because cutting me down won't stop what's coming," he said. "Your empire thinks it's eternal. But war is coming for you from beyond the stars, and you'll need more than fear to survive it. The hall froze at his words. The Queen's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, her towering form casting a shadow over him. "Are you threatening me, human?" she asked, her voice low. Daniel shook his head. "No, I'm warning you." His tone carried no arrogance, only certainty. She studied him, her pride wrestling with the truth she could feel beneath his words. There was something in him that her visions of war had never revealed, something her people did not yet see. The chain of destiny was pulling, and she could feel it tightening. That night, storms raged outside the citadel. Lightning split the sky and thunder shook the stone walls. In her chamber, the Queen stood by her window, staring into the chaos. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. Could it be true? Could her empire, unbroken for centuries, truly face a storm it could not endure? And why did she, a queen feared across worlds, find herself thinking not of her empire, but of the human who stood against her without trembling? She gripped her blade but found no answers, only questions. And deep inside, she felt the first crack in her certainty. Far below, Daniel sat awake in his cell. He could feel the storm shaking the citadel, but it did not frighten him. He had faced worse. What troubled him was not the storm outside, but the storm in the Queen's eyes. He had seen it before, the look of a leader torn between pride and fear. And he knew one thing. If destiny had placed him here, it was not to fight her. It was to change her. Whether she wanted it or not, their fates were now bound together. The storm passed, but its shadow lingered. When dawn broke over the spires of the citadel, the air was heavy with unease. Rumors spread like wildfire among the alien people. Some said the human carried a curse, that his presence had brought the storm. Others whispered that he was chosen by the stars, a sign of change their empire could not escape. The Queen heard these whispers, and though she ordered silence, they echoed in her own thoughts. Change was dangerous. Yet something about Daniel told her it was inevitable. In the days that followed, she did not order his death, nor did she set him free. Instead, she kept him close, watching. Guards shadowed his every step as he walked the great halls. He was allowed food, rest, and even glimpses of the city through narrow windows. The Queen wanted to see if he would break without chains, but Daniel did not bow his head. He studied everything, the carvings on the walls, the movements of the soldiers, the layout of the city. He was not a prisoner. He was preparing. The Queen could see it in his eyes. One evening, she summoned him to her war council. Her generals protested. "He is no ally," they warned. "He is a threat, a poison." But she silenced them with a single glance. When Daniel entered the council chamber, the room grew tense. The generals glared, their armored hands twitching at their blades. The Queen's voice carried like steel. "Human, you spoke of war beyond our borders. Speak now before my people and prove your words are not empty." Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp. "Your empire has conquered many, but the galaxy is vast. Out there are fleets that do not fear your blade. They fear nothing. They are coming, and they will not stop until everything burns." The silence that followed was heavier than any weapon. A general laughed harshly. "Lies. No fleet dares challenge us." But Daniel's gaze pierced him. "I've seen them. They leave nothing alive. Worlds turn to ash in their path. If you think your pride will shield you, you are already dead." His words struck the council like lightning. Anger rose in the room, yet so did doubt. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she studied him. There was no fear in his tone, no plea for mercy. Only truth. She had ruled long enough to know when someone spoke from experience. For the first time, she wondered if this fragile-looking human carried knowledge her empire desperately needed. That night, she found no rest. She walked through the silent corridors of her palace, her mind restless. His words clawed at her pride. She wanted to dismiss him as a liar, a weakling who spoke bravely to hide fear. But her instincts, sharpened by years of war, whispered otherwise. She remembered the way he had fought her in the arena, the way he had faced death without trembling, And she thought of the storm outside her window, the storm that felt like an omen. Perhaps fate had not brought him here by accident. Perhaps it had brought him as a warning. Meanwhile, Daniel was not idle. Though watched by guards, he found ways to earn their silence. He helped them fix broken weapons, shared survival tricks, and even bound their wounds after training drills. They did not trust him, but slowly they began to see him differently. He was not fragile, not helpless. He was useful. Word of his actions reached the queen, and though she did not admit it, she felt a strange sense of pride. He was bending her people without lifting a sword, and that unsettled her more than battle ever had. Days later, the warning came. A scout ship limped back from the outer stars, torn apart by fire. Its captain, pale and trembling, reported a fleet of shadows moving towards Ziora. Ships, darker than night, with weapons that devoured light itself. The council erupted in panic. Generals barked orders, some calling for immediate war, others demanding retreat. But the queen remembered Daniel's words. She turned to him, her eyes sharp as blades. "You spoke of this," she said. "These are the enemies you warned of?" Daniel nodded once. "Yes, and they won't stop." His calm certainty chilled the chamber. The queen dismissed the council and summoned Daniel alone. When they stood together in the torchlight, her voice was low but fierce. "You warned me, and now it comes to pass. Tell me, human, how do I fight a war against shadows that devour worlds?" Daniel met her gaze, his voice steady. "Not with fear, not with pride. You fight with everything your people are afraid to face. You fight with unity. You fight with hope. And sometimes, you fight with someone you never thought you'd trust." His eyes did not waver from hers. For a long moment, the queen said nothing. Then, with a sigh as heavy as stone, she whispered, "Perhaps destiny did bring you to me." The admission tasted bitter on her tongue, but also strangely freeing. The days that followed were unlike any the queen had known. For the first time in her reign, she allowed an outsider into her war chambers. For the first time, her people saw their queen listen, not command. Daniel's ideas clashed with the traditions of her empire, but piece by piece, they saw wisdom in them. Traps in the forests, alliances with tribes once ignored, weapons forged from the planet's own storms. The queen walked beside him through it all, her pride fighting against a truth she could no longer deny. The human she had once sought to kill was now becoming the weapon her empire might need most. But destiny's chain was not only forged in war. In the quiet moments when their voices were not raised in command, the queen felt something stirring within her chest. She watched him move with scars that told of endless battles, and she realized she wanted to know his story. Not just his strength. She hated the thought. She was a queen of Ziora, untouchable, unshaken. Yet when she stood near him, her heart betrayed her. Perhaps war was not the only battle destiny had chosen for her. Perhaps the true battle was within herself. The warning became reality faster than the queen had expected. Days after the scouts' report, the skies of Ziora darkened with shapes too massive to ignore. The enemy fleet emerged from the void like a storm of shadows, their ships sleek and black, absorbing the light of the stars. The air itself trembled with their presence. Alarms rang through the citadel as warriors rushed to their stations, banners unfurling, weapons raised. The people of Ziora had faced enemies before, but never anything like this. These invaders were not conquerors. They were erasers. They came not to rule, but to unmake. Daniel stood on the balcony of his chamber, watching the first ships pierce the clouds. He had seen this before, on other worlds. Planets burned, voices silenced, cities crumbling into ash. His jaw tightened. He had sworn never to let it happen again if he had the strength to stop it. Now fate had placed him here. He turned as the queen entered, her crimson armor shining, her blade at her side. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm inside. They are here," she said. "The battle begins at dawn." Daniel nodded once. "Then we fight together." The queen studied him in silence. Days ago, she would have spat at the idea of fighting beside a human. Now she could not imagine facing what was coming without him. She gave a sharp nod, her pride softened by necessity. "You will command with me," she said, her voice low. "My generals despise it, but they will obey. They must." Daniel met her gaze, steady and unyielding. "I don't care if they hate me. As long as they fight, as long as they survive, that's enough." His words carried no arrogance, only resolve. For the first time, she felt the weight of his scars as if they were her own. When dawn came, the battlefield stretched wide beneath a sky of fire. The enemy fleet descended like blades of night, their weapons striking with a silence more terrifying than thunder. Cities shook as beams of dark energy tore through stone and steel. The Queen's armies roared in defiance, their war cries rising to meet the invaders. Daniel stood at the Queen's side on the command platform, the wind tearing at his hair. His eyes locked on the chaos ahead. "They want you afraid," he said. "Don't give it to them. Show them your people still stand." The Queen raised her blade high, its crimson light blazing like a second sun. Her voice rang across the battlefield, amplified by the towers of the citadel. "Zeora does not bow. We are the storm, and we will break the night." Her people roared in answer, their courage ignited by her fire. Daniel felt the power of her words vibrate through him. For all her pride, for all her fury, she was more than a ruler. She was a force of nature, and he was glad to stand beside her. The battle began with fire. The enemy unleashed waves of drones, black machines that screamed through the air with precision. Daniel shouted orders, directing troops to use the terrain, to strike from shadows, to move with speed rather than stand in rigid lines. The Queen's generals balked at first, unused to fighting without strict formations. But when they saw the drones falling in clusters, their soldiers surviving longer than expected, they obeyed. The Queen herself cut through wave after wave, her blade carving crimson arcs of light, her movements both deadly and beautiful. She fought like a legend, and beside her, Daniel fought with raw defiance, his every strike proving that humans were not fragile at all. At one point, the enemy's advance pressed too close to the command line. Daniel leapt from the platform, chain still wrapped around his arm from the arena, using it to drag a drone from the sky before it could pierce the Queen's flank. The crowd of soldiers who saw it gasped, then cheered. The human was not just a symbol now, he was a warrior among them. The Queen landed beside him, her blade slicing through 3 drones at once. Their eyes met in the chaos, and for a moment the world seemed to fall away. They were not queen and prisoner. They were warriors bound by the same fire. Hours passed and the battlefield burned. Yet the invaders did not falter. Their fleets rained destruction from the sky, and their machines poured endlessly from the dark ships. Daniel's chest heaved with exhaustion, but his mind burned sharper than ever. He climbed back to the platform, shouting new commands. "Use the storms. Lure them into the lightning fields." The Queen's eyes widened at his audacity. The storms of Zeora were deadly, even to her own people, but she trusted him. Without hesitation, she gave the order. Soldiers pulled back, drawing the enemy into the skies where thunder raged. Lightning fell like spears, tearing through the black machines in blinding arcs. For the first time, the invaders staggered. The Queen's generals stared in awe. A tactic born not from tradition but from survival. A tactic only the human could have thought of. They looked at him differently now, some with respect, others with fear. The Queen, however, felt something else stirring in her chest. Standing beside him, her heart beat in rhythm with his. She had challenged him once to prove her strength. Now she realized his strength was becoming hers, and hers his. Together, they were reshaping the battlefield. Together they were rewriting fate. By nightfall, the invaders withdrew to the edge of the skies, their assault slowed but not broken. Fires burned across the city, but Zeora still stood. The Queen stood atop the citadel, her blade dim with blood, her armor scorched. Daniel stood beside her, battered, exhausted, yet unbowed. The silence after the storm was heavy. The queen turned to him, her voice low. Today you fought as one of us, perhaps even more. Daniel met her gaze, his lips curved in a faint smile. I didn't fight for you, he said. I fought for them, for people who deserve to live. But as the firelight flickered across their faces, both knew it was not the whole truth. They had fought for each other too, whether they admitted it or not. The fires of battle still smoldered when the enemy returned. The first clash had been only a test, and now their true strength came crashing down. The night sky filled with their warships blotting out the stars. Their engines rumbled like an endless storm, and their weapons carved streaks of black fire across the horizon. The people of Ziora had celebrated surviving the first wave, but their cheers died when they saw this second fleet. It was not an army. It was an ocean. Inside the citadel, the war council erupted in panic. Generals argued, their voices sharp and desperate. Some called for retreat into the deep caverns, others demanded one last stand. None agreed. The queen sat at the head of the table, her eyes steady, though her chest burned with fury. She let them argue until the noise became unbearable, then slammed her blade into the stone table. Silence fell like a blade itself. We will not run, she declared. If we die on our feet, but I will not see my empire crawl into the dirt. The council bowed their heads, but fear still lingered in their eyes. Daniel stood at her side, silent until now. When she turned to him, his gaze was hard. They're testing you, he said. Breaking your will before they break your walls. If you fight them with pride alone, you'll lose. You need something more. The queen's eyes narrowed. What more is there than strength? Daniel leaned forward. Hope. Unity. They fear that more than any blade. If you want to win, you have to give your people something they've never had before. Something worth dying for, and worth living for. His words struck her deeper than he realized. Hope was not a weapon her empire had ever wielded, but perhaps it was the one they needed most. The days that followed were filled with preparation. Daniel worked among the soldiers, showing them tactics their traditions had never taught. Hit-and-run strikes, traps in the jungles, teamwork across tribes that had once been rivals. Slowly, the soldiers began to trust him, their respect replacing suspicion. They began to call him Iron Spirit, a name whispered with awe. The queen watched this transformation with quiet wonder. A human, once mocked as fragile, now stood as a pillar her empire leaned on. She should have hated it, should have resented his influence. Yet when she looked at him, she felt no hatred. She felt something else, something she could not name, but it grew stronger with every glance. At night, she found herself visiting the training grounds where he rested by the fire. She would stand in the shadows, watching him mend weapons or share food with soldiers who had once spit at him. His laughter was rare, but when it came, it lit the faces of those around him. One night, unable to stay hidden, she stepped into the light. Daniel looked up, surprised but calm. You watch like a hunter, he said. Are you here to strike or to speak? The queen smirked faintly. Perhaps both. She sat beside him, her armor clinking softly. For a long moment they were silent, the fire crackling between them. Then she asked, almost against her, Will, why do you fight for us, human? You could have fled. You could have let us fall. Daniel stared into the flames before answering. Because I know what it's like to lose everything. I won't watch it happen again if I can stop it. His voice carried sorrow beneath the strength, and for the first time the queen saw not just the warrior, but the man. The next morning, the storm broke again. The enemy struck with terrifying force, their weapons raining destruction upon the outer cities. Screams echoed across the valleys as towers crumbled. The queen rode into battle at the front, crimson blade blazing. Daniel fought beside her, chain in one hand, stolen alien blade in the other. Together they cut a path through waves of drones, their movements so in tune it seemed as though they had trained together for years. Where she struck with precision and fury, he fought with raw defiance and speed. Together they became a storm that even the enemy struggled to contain. But the invaders adapted quickly. Their machines began to move differently, shifting their attacks to exploit weaknesses in the defenses. Daniel saw it first. The enemy was not just fighting, they were learning. "They're studying us," he shouted over the roar of battle. "Every move, every strike, they'll adjust until we're broken." The Queen's eyes blazed. "Then we change faster," she roared. Her people answered, fighting with renewed fury. Yet for every drone destroyed, 2 more descended. For every victory won, another wound was carved into the land. The Queen's heart thundered with rage and desperation. Was even she enough to stop this tide? Then it happened. In the chaos, a drone spear struck the Queen's flank, piercing her armor. She staggered, her blade falling for the first time in battle. The soldiers gasped in horror, the line faltering. The invaders pressed, harder, sensing weakness. But Daniel was there in an instant, his arm wrapping around her before she fell. He dragged her back, his chain whipping out to crush the drone that had struck her. With the Queen wounded, the army looked ready to collapse. Daniel climbed the nearest wreckage, his voice thundering across the field. "Stand. She is not broken, and neither are you. If you fall now, everything ends." His roar carried through the storm, and to the shock of all, the soldiers rallied. They rose, fighting harder than before, not for the Queen's pride, but for the hope the human gave them. The Queen, her wound burning, leaned against Daniel. Her pride screamed in shame, but her heart whispered something different. You saved me," she breathed, her voice weak but steady. Daniel looked into her eyes, his face streaked with blood and ash. "No," he said. "We saved each other." For a heartbeat, as the battle raged around them, the world grew still. In that moment, bound by pain and fire, the Queen felt destiny's chain close around them. It was not pride that held her anymore. It was something far stronger and far more dangerous. The battlefield burned with the fury of gods. Towers lay shattered, the jungles smoldered, and the skies boiled with fire from the enemy fleet. The Queen's wound slowed her, but not her resolve. She refused to leave the front. Daniel stood. Beside her, his chain and blade coated with ash and blood. Their people rallied around them, yet the enemy kept pressing, endless and merciless. The invaders wanted not victory but erasure. They wanted silence where life had thrived. The Queen could feel her empire trembling on the edge of collapse. As the second day of battle raged, Daniel saw what the Queen's generals did not. The invaders weren't simply overwhelming them. They were driving the defenders toward the citadel itself, forcing the final stand into the heart of Zeora. If the citadel fell, the spirit of the people would die with it. He turned to the Queen, his voice sharp over the clash of war. "We can't keep fighting like this, they'll bleed us dry. We need one strike, something to break their heart before they break ours." The Queen grimaced through her pain, her eyes blazing. "Then tell me, human, where do we strike?" Daniel pointed to the sky. At the center of the enemy fleet loomed a colossal ship, black as a void, its core pulsing with a light that devoured everything it touched. That's their command. Cut off the head, the body dies. But it won't be easy. Their defenses will tear apart anything that gets close. The Queen's lips curved into a grim smile. Then it won't be easy. That is the only way worth fighting. She raised her crimson blade high, shouting to her army. "We strike the heart of the night." Her warriors roared in answer, their voices carrying across the flames. For the first time, their cries were not born of fear or pride alone. They were born of hope. The plan was madness. Daniel and the Queen led a spearhead assault through the chaos, carving a path toward the black ship. Alien warriors followed them, their armor cracked, their weapons dim, yet their spirits unyielding. Lightning split the sky as Zeora's storms raged, striking invader drones from the air. Daniel fought at the Queen's side, his movements honed by desperation and instinct. Every time she faltered, his hand steadied her. Every time he stumbled, her blade cut the path clear. Together, they became a force that defied the storm itself. At last, they reached the enemy's command ship. Its surface was jagged, alive with shifting shadows. The Queen's soldiers fell back to hold the line, leaving only her and Daniel to board. They ascended the ramp of black steel, their breaths heavy, their bodies battered. Inside, the air felt dead, colder than the void itself. Machines shifted in the darkness, their eyes glowing with hunger. Daniel tightened his grip on his chain. The Queen lifted her blade, her voice a whisper only he could hear. If this is where we fall, then we fall together. Daniel glanced at her, his expression steady. Then we don't fall at all. They fought through the heart of the ship, each step a storm of blood and steel. The machines swarmed in endless waves, but they cut them down side by side, their strength flowing into each other. At last, they reached the core, a massive sphere of black energy, pulsing like a rotten heart. Its light clawed at their flesh. Its hum shook their bones. The Queen staggered, her wound burning anew, but Daniel caught her before she fell. "Go," she whispered, her pride breaking into something softer. "Strike it while I hold them back." But Daniel shook his head, his voice fierce. "Not without you. We do this together." With one final effort, they hurled themselves at the core. The Queen's blade struck deep, crimson light clashing against the black heart. Daniel wrapped his chain around it, pulling with every ounce of strength left in him. The core screamed, its light shattering into shards of fire. The ship trembled, cracks splitting across its hull. Alarms shrieked as the invader fleet faltered, their drones collapsing, their weapons dimming. The heart of the night was breaking. The Queen fell to her knees as the ship began to collapse. Daniel grabbed her, hauling her toward the ramp. Fire and shadow swallowed the corridors behind them, but together they burst into the open air. There, soldiers cheered as the black ship exploded, its fragments burning across the sky. The rest of the fleet wavered, their command broken. One by one they turned, retreating into the void from which they had come. Ziora was scarred, battered, but alive. The war was over. On the steps of the citadel the people gathered, their voices rising in triumph. They hailed their Queen, crimson blade still glowing with the fire of victory, but they also hailed the human who had stood beside her, who had fought like one of their own. Daniel stood in silence, weary and scarred, but unbowed. The Queen looked at him, her heart heavy with something she had never felt before. She stepped forward, placing her hand on his chest. "You came as a prisoner," she said, her voice carrying across the square. "But you fought as my equal. Without you, we would have fallen. With you, we rise." The crowd erupted in thunderous cheers. Later, when the fires dimmed and the stars returned to the sky, the Queen stood alone on her balcony. Daniel approached quietly, his steps steady despite his exhaustion. For a long moment, they said nothing, only gazing at the horizon, where the enemy had fled. Then the Queen spoke softly. "I challenged you, human, to prove you weak, but destiny bound us instead." Daniel looked at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Maybe destiny doesn't care about pride. Maybe it just knows when two people are stronger together. The Queen met his gaze, her fierce eyes softening for the first time. For all her power, for all her pride, she felt something she had never known before. She felt the bond between them, forged in blood and fire, stronger than any crown. And in that silence, beneath the stars of a world reborn, both knew the truth. Their destinies were no longer their own. They belonged to each other. Forever.